Speaking of pronunciations, okay, just to get this out of the way, I'm pretty sure that it's Claire Denis, if you're going to be French about it. So
I can't even indulge this bit anymore.
It's not
just
a bit.
Every single episode, we're arguing about how to pronounce some crazy European name.
I will not allow this to be the opening again.
This is my fault because I messaged Marc and I was like, I'm not even going to say her name because I'm afraid I'm going to get berated for mispronunciation.
I don't think our audience could bear much more pronunciation talk in so few episodes.
Okay, so we need to let's just establish. Claire Denis is what you want to say, Marc?
I'm going to pronounce it wrong just out of spite.
We're going to break Seth in this one, I can tell.
So also Claire Denis' most famous film, which looks like Beau Travail, but it looks like on Wikipedia it's Beau Travage.
Marc, you got to stop this. I'm going to leave.
So listen, when you hear me say Beau Travage, just know that's what I'm talking about. Okay? And the director of Possession has
Żuławski.
Żuławski I think is fine.
Żuławski.
His first name has like a Z where there shouldn't be a Z, like right by an R. I think maybe it's Andrzej, maybe.
These are all white people. I'm not worried about it.
Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the podcast island of misfit films, whether they be difficult, disgusting, or just misunderstood. I am Marc Dottavio.
I'm Seth Troyer.
And today's topic is Arthouse horror, featuring two films that might have been too gory and too extreme for the art film crowd, and too difficult, dare I say, pretentious for horror junkies. Those films are Andrzej Żuławski's 1981 psychological horror film Possession and Claire Denis' 2001 erotic or anti-erotic thriller Trouble Every Day.
We're on the island of misfit films. We watch
like
these
that?
Gross movies so you don't have to.
So I want to start out here by introducing
Singing.
our very special guest, now that Seth is done with his singing.
I am.
And today joining us is Amy Hensarling, a good friend of ours from Letterboxd. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
I am thrilled and honored. Thank you for having me. I'm fairly certain I invited myself because when you guys were on Twitter, I was like, oh, I'll be a guest speaker sometime. And here I am. So I appreciate it.
Here you are. That's how Seth got on the show. He just kind of elbowed his way in.
Volunteered.
I wandered in front of the laptop one day. Hi,
Yeah,
Amy.
that's
It's
how
so
it-
good to meet you.
Oh, yes. And I didn't know Seth until now. So hello, Seth. Nice to meet you as well.
Mhm. We go all the way back to when we were having technical difficulties 20 minutes ago, and Tony couldn't get it to work. Those were the good old days.
It's a long
all Tony's
history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, I mean, Amy and I think, started following each other on Letterboxd like about a year ago.
Mhm.
Had lots of exchanges on there, but this is our first, like, face-to-face. This is very exciting.
Yes. And I am happy to be, I feel like this is almost a vehicle for like verification of identity because it's like, oh,
Right.
we are real people named Amy and Marc and Seth and we exist and we're not just robots on Letterboxd.
It's official.
Yes.
It's-
So I'm happy to be doing that
yeah,
as
we
well.
have proof now.
Yes. Blue check.
Yeah, and at some point we'll all hold up a newspaper that'll show the date as proof.
Of being held hostage.
I don't know how people
man.
even do that anymore because I certainly don't have any newspapers around here.
That's
I
fair.
got none.
I got nothing with the date on it except my phone. That might be helpful.
The Daily
You work for
Planet,
Letterboxd.
1955.
1955.
If you work for Letterboxd, please send us a check or we will release the names of the users that we were catfished by before Amy.
Yes,
joined
please.
the podcast.
Sponsor us, Letterboxd. We love you.
It's time for that letterbox money.
For sure. Yeah, they are like our official sponsor for this episode.
Truly, because I wouldn't be here at all. I wouldn't even know Marc existed without Letterboxd. The magic of Letterboxd.
Look at this.
Yeah. We're all over the country being brought together. Bad weather and good weather.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I do want to mention also that Marc and I both really like Mike D'Angelo as, like, I don't know if he's your favorite critic, Marc, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the reason we bonded was because we're both so familiar with his style and his rating system. So that's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Maybe I think that might have been what caused our first connection there. So, yeah. Mike, if you're listening out there, we're coming for you next.
Whoa. TP his house. Is he on Letterboxd? Is he a Letterboxd guy?
Yes, he is actually. But is
he the hippo that works for IndieWire?
That's David Ehrlich.
No, yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's one of the most popular people. Although Mike has like 20,000 followers or something, because he was one of the first like original online critics when the internet was first starting.
Oh my God, same.
Yeah, and Seth, you would probably enjoy. He has besides his Patreon, he has a blog called The Man Who Viewed Too Much, and it's full of reviews, like, and lists back to like the 90s. So it's quite expansive. So
I love seeing that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we've buttered him up enough now that we'll get him on someday.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
But
get that money.
Exactly. Once the Letterboxd check comes in, man, we're gonna get them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even Ehrlich, the hippo.
Oh yeah, that would be a good one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to start off today talking about Possession, which is a 1981 film by Andrzej Żuławski. And I think this actually kind of goes back to our first episode, which was about Antichrist, in terms of some kind of a comparison. Both of these movies premiered at Cannes. They both won Best Actress for their lead actress. Arguably, maybe not so much, possibly for a great performance, but also just kind of like surviving through to the end of the movie, because it really puts him through the ringers. And I think our topic for this particular episode is a little similar to what we talked about with Antichrist too, because these are movies that really straddle the line between like art house cinema and extreme horror. And in the same way that Antichrist kind of does that, I think Possession and Trouble Every Day both have directors who aren't known for horror movies and followed up some of their big successes by suddenly veering into one and alienating a lot of people on both sides of the genre divide. So
ladies being sexy and scary at the same time. Genre.
Yeah, exactly. So I think these movies do have a lot in common, but Żuławski is a good guy to start with because I haven't seen any of his other movies, but my understanding is that a few of them have some horror elements, but this is really the only one that you would have gone into the video store and found under the horror section.
It's supposed to be awesome. I know, I think it's like The Devil or something that's supposed to be really awesome. A bunch of his movies are supposed to be sweet.
Yeah, and from what I gather, even though they kind of span genres, they're all in a similar register, which we'll talk about how that is, how that unfolds in Possession. But just to give a little bit of background on this, like I said, it came out in 1981, and even though it premiered at Cannes, there was kind of a stretch there afterwards where it wasn't that available. I kind of got caught up in the whole UK video nasty hysteria where there were movies that were being released unrated, in the VHS section in video stores without getting rated. And of course, they were afraid that this was going to be corrupting the youth, that these, were falling under the youths and that they might, these may fall under their obscenity laws. And
because the youths are going to sit through Possession as they're really like having a great time they're going to turn this off. Like the cool skateboarder kids that want to get corrupted aren't going to watch this movie.
Seth, you have little faith.
I don't believe in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to see it on the same list as like Cannibal Holocaust and Faces of Death series. And if anybody went in and then grabbed Possession, I'm not sure they would have any idea what hit them.
Yeah. Well, they probably also got the shitty. Isn't there like a 90-minute version that the US got? At
An
least
81-minute
initially.
version.
Yeah.
And this is a 2-hour movie, so I don't have any idea what an under 90-minute version of this would look like.
Yeah, I found that one first, and I was like, "Oh man, that this it probably." And looking back, like, not that like the added information really helps me understand what a lot of the like crazy elliptical narrative is doing, but like if I had any less, I'd be even more confused. I feel like it probably bit him in the ass.
Yeah, and I think that when this was re-released last year, finally on 4K Blu-ray, it kind of brought a renewed interest about the film with it. I know that's the reason I ended up coming to my attention, and I first watched it like around Halloween time last year. And the 4K version is gorgeous and really stunning. That's the one that you watched too, right, Amy?
Yeah, and I actually did the same thing as you, oddly enough. I saw it as like part of my Spooktober watch list with my friend Joel, and I only knew about it because it was on Metrograph. Like they were showing it in the theater, and they had restored it. So yeah, I only heard of it because of the restoration. I had never heard of the movie at all prior. So
same here. And even once I did hear about it, I was not at all prepared. Like I missed the memo about what this movie actually is like.
No, I don't.
I felt like I felt like I started out like my first response to this movie was like, "Are you sure, Marc? Is that one like?" It just seemed like maybe it was like a ghost movie, like maybe it wasn't all that fucking wild, but it's fucking wild. Whoa, hey, I could barely handle some of this stuff. Oh my,
it's a lot. It's a bit much, as they say.
A bit
much.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Because it comes at you right out the gate. And I suppose I should maybe do a little summary before we start getting too much into it.
Oh, man, good luck. I don't know, man. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me to do it.
I'll let you off the hook here. Unless, Amy, you wanted to take a stab at it.
Are you, is this is spoilery territory, right? Like you guys just spoil stuff, right? Like there's no...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so
rotten.
It is, I think... Adam Naiman, there was a critic who described it as a horror Kramer versus Kramer. But after rewatching it yesterday, I want to describe it as like Blue Valentine on crack.
That'll do.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because it does remind me a lot of Blue Valentine in terms of the male response to a breakup or like the end of the end of a marriage. But yeah, basically it's about a marriage that's on the rocks for reasons that we don't know. We think there's an affair, but like it's much deeper than that. And they have a poor child, Bob, of all names, a blonde-haired child named Bob, who is also kind of tormented. And it's crazy. It's wild. It's like...
Yeah, from that point on, it is pretty hard to give a synopsis because we could at least say that this takes place in West Berlin, that I think is kind of significant. So we get lots of shots of the Berlin Wall. And I know Żuławski himself is Polish and was like forced to leave Poland because of film censorship and clashing with the government there. So you kind of have that as an undercurrent, but then we have this couple, which is played by Isabelle Adjani, who was the one who won Best Actress at Cannes. Mm-hmm. And then of all people, Sam Neill as her husband of Jurassic Park fame. And boy, we're far from Jurassic Park, though.
This movie is why he doesn't want to have a family in Jurassic Park. Why he doesn't like kids. He doesn't want to get involved anymore.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he maintains his New Zealand accent in this as well.
I think that a lot of people watching this will be their first time even realizing that he's not like American.
And that he used to be so young. He's quite young.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we even get a little Sam Neill nudity in this too. So
Good looking fella.
You Stan Neils out there, this is the one to go for.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to describe also, just because the movement in the film is almost its own character as well. Like the camera is like stalking them the whole time. So I feel like there's a third party that's always present, even though there's just two central characters.
Yeah, it feels like just about every aspect of the film is like haunted with its own ghost. Like there's nothing at a certain point, there's like nothing to hold on to in this. Like there's no one you can trust. Even just like the basic narrative of the movie seems to be like haunted. And yeah, I like that you brought up the camera. The camera seems like
Yeah.
it's inhabited by a ghost, and they are talking to the camera some of the time. Like they have like a weird relationship with the camera or who's behind it, which, you know, I imagine maybe I start to imagine there's just like a horrible gelatinous Lovecraft monster behind the camera who's making all this happen. And I just got pulled into this trap or something. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely relevant to bring up that this was written by Żuławski in the wake of a contentious divorce. And that is just splattered all over this movie, because I'd say first at least 45 minutes, there's not even a hint that this is a horror film.
Yes.
And it's just a lot of, I mean, Sam Neill is a psychotically jealous lover, and his wife isn't that hinged herself. So we get a whole lot of confrontations between them and screaming matches. And it's not until a little bit later that she kind of moves out and takes up residence in this strange building where, speaking of a Lovecraftian goo monster, seems like she's kind of, I don't know, constructing or giving life to some kind of demon, kind of Hellraiser style, where it's a little more developed and closer to a being every time that we see it. And I'm really not sure I can say much more past that. You know, there's murders and more contention between these two people, but it's just like one thing after another that just piles on and on and on and on of incidents.
Yeah, it's actually, I think part of the reason I like it so much is because it is a breakup movie at heart. So it kind of reminds me in a way of how I felt about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, where the horror that's kind of in the periphery and the exterior is a manifestation of their internal pain. And so it seems like it makes sense why it's so intense, because the amount of feeling that they have is so intense. So it's just like a reflection of that, which I appreciate, because it makes what they're going through horrifying visually, not just like pondering it.
Sure, and I think if there's any through line to this movie, it's that there's some connection between the grotesque horrors that are rising out of everything and between the emotional turmoil that's going on between these two people.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate
but
that.
And I do definitely want to talk about how this starts out, because the tone of this movie is it jives right into these hysterical fights between Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani. It's like if this movie could be measured like on a meter, it would be like a needle that starts out kind of in the red and then just gets further and further into the red as it goes, which,
Machine
like you said, is a lot
up
to take in. Yes, they have these just like circular screaming matches with each other, and they trash a restaurant. There's a scene where he like slaps her over and over till she's bloody, and she runs out on the street in a car, or like a truck veers out of the way and a car falls off the back of the truck.
Yeah,
And
it's just harnessed chaos. It is just harnessing and like the like who and what and like context seems to matter very little. Like, and that continues throughout the movie. It's like insert partner, insert like instigating issue, and you can like bring your own baggage to. I think like the sort of, again, like experimental, like non-linear cutting that goes on only helps you to just sort of bring your own like breakup baggage and romantic past to this, and also like um it just makes it more about the raw feeling of like argument and disagreement, rather than like it actually being about like specific soap opera of it.
Yeah, and I would also say it's a very good representation of how it feels to be dumped. Like specifically like when you're the person who's being abandoned, that like craziness where you're like, who is he? You know, I have to know type of thing. Like, can we please discuss this? Like that whole position that he's in, I feel like they fleshed that out very well, actually, because that's such a vulnerable position, and by that time, usually the person who's doing the leaving doesn't care to answer those questions because they're already done.
Mm-hmm.
So that feeling, I feel like, is really triggered.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to get the closure you want. That's like how it almost always works. Like it's not ever, even in like the best situations, you're not going to totally get the outcome and like everything you want, because in that situation, it's by default that you're not going to get what you want. You are the one who said it didn't work. It broke, whatever it was, you know?
Yeah, and they amp that feeling up to like nth degrees for this movie.
yeah, this
Yes.
amp goes to 11.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And it also goes to 12 and 13 and 14 and 15.
It's
yeah,
very metal.
it is
Because, yeah,
it is
we
very
never...
metal.
Yeah, that's
Very,
a good way to
very
put
metal. Because again, it's like, yeah, it's all of it being just like every aspect of the plot and all the dialogue feels that it has to be like blunt force. Like it is so wild how it goes out of its way to like make every scene just like too much, almost to like an
Visceral.
absurd level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you brought up David Lynch. Like a lot of this, like the emotions don't feel real, and you sort of have to find you sort of find the movie's emotional reality as it goes along, because it's not our reality. In the same way that David Lynch's worlds sort of have their own rules and have their own ideas about like how people act, but they're obviously not acting like anyone you've ever met, you know, or you hope so.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the barrier to entry for this movie, is how much you can take of that and if you can get onto its wavelength. Because I know the first time that I watched this last year, I was just not ready for what this was. And I had the benefit this time of being more prepared for it, I guess. But the first time I was just not expecting there to be to be so over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of almost like in every scene, they're just trying to see who can out crazy the other, like who can push themselves further and further down the line. And you would be surprised at how much room there is still left to push.
Right. I didn't like
once
this
that stuff
immediately.
starts, right?
I had trouble with this like from the get-go, like at the first like 10 to 15 minutes, because I think I'm not alone. Like your first time watching this, I think, is like a lot of you like, wait, did I miss something? Like we're jumping right into the middle of an like crazy argument. Like, wait, what is happening? Like who is in on what, and who is the one who is like spirit induced, who is the one who needs an exorcist? It becomes like very confusing and hard to know, because again, like keep on the floor keeps dropping out from underneath you.
Yeah, and there's so much just, histrionics there that if you're not really willing to put yourself in there, I could see somebody having a reaction to this that on one hand is like, whoa, this is like radical and overwhelming and tapping into something wild. And on the other hand, it could just be like, this is cacophony. This is just like exasperating. And that was where I landed the first time that I watched this. But I think that that's kind of the reaction that this movie is out to inspire in people. I usually see that people either think this is a masterpiece or just
Trash.
utter nonsense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And because
yeah,
I think
it's
there's
mean.
are
It
parts
doesn't
of
like
that.
you.
Yeah. And I think there are, parts of this that are so loud and over the top that it almost plays like like a parody of like a John Cassavetes like relationship drama or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I read too that when they screened it like last year, when Metro Ralph screened it, like the audience was like dying laughing at like some of the scenes that were very serious, and like it's like no. like the subway scene is not supposed to be funny, like LOL, like look at this, it's supposed to be like deeply terrifying and like visceral. So I think either sometimes people laugh during horror movies because they're scared, but then also this could definitely go into territory where it's like people are laughing because it's so over the top and they can't connect the material with themselves, so it's just funny.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because that was on my mind. I guess I didn't anticipate that being such a big part of this, that it is like you don't know what to do with these like monologues, these like really silly like on paper at least like monologues that they're throwing at each other,
Right.
along with like really weird esoteric stuff, like talking about being like, do you know about God? Do you believe in God? God is inside me. And then also just jumping back to like, who is he? Does he fuck you better? And all this. It's just all like
Theatrical.
I don't know. Like I could imagine some laughter going on, and just the sort of in a mysterious laughter. Like it's a absurd sort of laughter, I think, that I found myself having at certain points of just like, what is this? Whoa. Like just I don't know what to do with this. That kind of laughter.
Yeah, and because the dialogue, a lot of it is stilted. I think in an intentional way. David Lynch is somebody who evokes deliberately stilted performances and writing and stuff.
Yes.
And this isn't presented exactly the same way because they're really encouraged to push it as far and as loud as they can. But like Seth said, there's so much dialogue in this that I kept wanting to like, all right, I can pause this every other line and try to like dissect the import of everything they're saying. Or I feel like I would have found that more frustrating than illuminating probably. But you're right. They'll just suddenly start being like, don't you believe in God? For me, God is a disease. Or through the disease, we can reach God.
Or like the two sisters speech, that's to me that stands out as the most like out of left field, like the faith and chance.
Sisters of chance, sisters of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah, when she's looking at the camera directly and saying it, that's where I'm like, okay, I'm not sure that we're supposed to rationally grasp this. It seems like it's just more atmospheric.
Well, am I wrong in how I'm glad you brought that scene up because that's like my favorite thing in this movie is like I think they're having that conversation about where it's her telling the story, right? About and then she just starts talking to the camera and then it jumps to her in the subway, right?
Yeah.
The subway sequence happens in the middle of the story, which the subway sequence is basically her arriving in a subway. We don't know why she's there. I don't know what she's doing. And she just basically explodes with emotion. And it's like, I think it's just a single take, I think. And she is just like oozing blood and who knows what else and screaming and thrashing around for like a whole minute and a half. And then they cut back to her finishing the story.
Right.
It's,
I think that
I love how
she's
this thing is
supposed to
edited
be-
together.
I think she's supposed to be having a miscarriage.
Yes, I was about to tell Seth that. I don't know if he knew that.
Hmm.
She's having
No.
she had a miscarriage in that scene.
Oh, they did mention that. I was wondering if it had something to do with that, or if it was just like, this is me manifesting my chaos while this is what's going on in my head while I'm talking to the camera.
She was getting rid of the creature's spawn demon thing. That's why she was in so much pain, because it was oozing out of her.
I think that's probably the most notorious scene in this movie. Like, if there's a touchstone scene, it's this subway scene, because, Adjiani just goes out there, and I believe they did only two takes of it.
That's the same I read. Yeah.
Yeah, and that they mostly used the stuff from the first.
Yes.
And he just has her go just absolutely hysterical, just screaming and wailing and rolling around on the ground for, like Seth said, like minutes on end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really like, you don't see something like that often, that's that unhinged in a movie like this, or any movie really. And by the end, there's like blood and then like green and white goo like oozing out from behind her like neck and her legs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is like a Oscar nominated actress who he got to just like roll around in the muck and shriek her head off. And that's kind of the movie in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah,
and back to the laughter and everything that could be induced by this. It is because it is so, like, the chaos is gleeful. It almost feels like after a while, watching, whether it's that scene, it feels like like she's fucking rocking out or something. And then there's like other scenes where they're delivering these crazy lines and they're like smiling, like at the camera quite often. So it is this, again, very metal ass thing that's like, they are cannibal corpse and they are here to freak you out, and they love doing it.
Yeah. And she's also, I'm pretty sure that when the actress saw the final product, she like fainted and she had to get therapy, and she was very, very traumatized when she saw the movie. Like, it wasn't during the filmmaking that she kind of lost it. It was when she saw it, because she just couldn't believe like what it actually looked like in the end.
That makes I'm glad you brought that up. I remember reading a little bit about that, and I wasn't sure which one it was. But I can imagine that is an aspect of filmmaking that is probably very disturbing for people. I mean, like, even this, where I listen back to one of these episodes and I like listen to myself speak, it's like intense just to, like, whether it's you on video or you on audio and listening to yourself back, you're faced with yourself, like, and in an apparently true form, and it can be a little confusing or even disturbing. So imagine doing this, exploding and revealing the most like crazy things you can do in front of a camera. It must be very disturbing for some people.
Yes.
Yeah. And, to kind of further elaborate on the things that might inspire laughter, there are some very specific things in this movie. And the first of them, I think, is Anna is Isabelle Adjiani's character's name. And she does end up having this lover named Heinrich, who, I'm just even mentioning him now because he's like this almost like touchy-feely new age kind of guy.
He's a fancy boy. He's a fancy boy.
Yeah, but he can like fight though. Neill. Like he's like he's like in great shape, and like it's like karate. Like when he's like there's like is a very interesting character in my opinion, because he's so precise.
He spends like part of the scene just like embracing Sam Neill, like holding his head, and he'll get like right into his face to like talk to him, almost like they're gonna kiss. And then soon in the scene, he's like karate chopping the shit out of him. And it's just every time he shows up, I couldn't help but laugh, like, because he always had some silly thing to say and this weird perspective on everything. Like, he wants to be his buddy, but he also, isn't afraid to kick his ass.
Yeah, he is almost more bizarre than anyone else in the movie, quite frankly. Like,
yeah, he's another thread where I'm like, there's so much emphasis on him too. Like we meet his mother at a certain point, and she's also like weird and mysterious, and like, what is this person? Like, why are we so obsessed with him? Like he's like he feels like he's almost a part of this evil, or maybe he doesn't know it, but he is. I don't even know.
I think he represents everything that Sam Neill's character isn't. So
Old.
or like very mystical. Like Sam Neill's job is like very rooted in like facts, and I mean, we don't really know what his job is, but it seems to be very practical and like methodical, whereas this guy is like, what was that, the postcard? It was like, I've seen half of God's face and the other half is you. I mean, Sam Neill's character would never say something like that. So obviously she's like drawn to the poetic, just like crazy persona that her husband isn't. And I think that's kind of why he's there. It's like a contrast point.
Sure. And it drives Sam crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, since we get into spoilers, you know, by just the nature of this podcast, Heinrich he ends up discovering that Anna has killed a few people and that she has this creature with her. He like stabs him. He ends up back with Sam Neill, and there's another really gross scene where Sam Neill like clogs up a toilet so that it fills with water. He vomits into it. Then he knocks the guy out with the toilet like cap and drowns him in the toilet.
He's just gotta vomit into it first. He can't just drown him in the toilet. He's gonna make himself puke into it first.
I gotta say, Mark, if I listened to you describing this movie, I would think that I would hate it. And I actually love this movie. So I don't know what kind of person I like. I'm listening to this and I'm like, but I gave this 5 stars. I think it's great, but it sounds horrible. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It is so much about how it happens rather than what happens is what is so entrancing about the movie. It's how it's all put together.
Good point, Seth. Thank you for redeeming my taste.
No, I think I feel the same way. And it's hard to, I wonder what it was. Yeah. What is actually the thing that made this elevate from just being gross, which some movies that we review on here are, you know.
Yeah. I think it's very intentional.
I am
Tony,
a big fan of Tony.
Oh, I wasn't trying to squeak in and derail us, but before we maybe, since it sounds like we may be pivoting to our final little session on this movie, I just wanted to say that I am very much Team Heinrich, and I think the last awesome thing that he does in this movie, among many, is that after getting stabbed, like in what looks like a pretty serious spot to get stabbed in by this demonic creature living in this 200-year-old brownstone, he just calls up Marc and like wants to meet him at the corner bar, and that's
Yep.
instead of like riding his motorcycle to the hospital or something. So I love Heinrich.
I think I was so distracted by everything else in this movie that like next time I watch it, I am just gonna focus on Heinrich like a bunch.
Wise.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah, this is
I love
Heinrich's
him
movie.
in hindsight. In hindsight. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie, and maybe it's just another good example of what you're in for, even in like a seemingly normal scene in this movie, where there's the scene where Sam Neill is with his kid, Bob, and they're like playing with trucks and stuff on the ground, and he gets a call. I think it's from Heinrich's mother. I can't remember like where it's in the chronology, but the camera, he's like talking to her and stuff, and he is staring at the camera, still playing with the boy, and there's all this like scary buildup, and it looks like he's like chasing the camera slowly. He's like crawling on the ground, and he's like, he just has this crazy look on his face. And then as if that wasn't scary enough, he like leaves, and then like the little kid, the Bob gets up and he's like, "Mommy is calling me." And then the grocery lady comes in and faints. It's like, I'm trying to get like, I tried to like rewatch that and like write everything that happened in that scene down, and it just, again, like you said, Amy, it sounds crazy.
Y'all are, yeah.
The actual events.
It sounds so much crazier than it actually is, which in itself is a triumph that we could make it sound crazier than it is. That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's why it's just so hard to talk about, because I could see somebody listening to this who hasn't seen the movie and being like, surely you guys could do a better job of really describing like what's happening here in the movie, but it really does seem to get incoherent at certain points. We haven't even touched on how at some point here Sam Neill meets this teacher who looks exactly like his wife, but with green eyes.
Man, we have so much work to do.
And she becomes this big character, and she's played by the same actress. And at first I'm thinking, like, are we supposed to interpret her as just a lady who mysteriously looks like the wife? Is it actually the wife, like in a wig or something? Because that's what her husband's character thinks when he first sees her, is he's like, what are you doing? And then he realizes it's not the same lady. And as far as the like funny parts of this, I was always like taken aback when she shows up like to visit them at home. And as far as we know, this is the first time that she's like, visited in person or, at home in private with this student and his dad. And within a minute, she's like finishing the son's bath, like bathing him. She puts him to bed and then starts doing the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And then very quickly is in bed naked with Sam Neill. And it's just like another damn thing that's going on in this movie.
Yeah.
But it freaks out Bob, right? It's like Bob gets like a weird sense or something. I think he like wakes up in the middle of the night, like he has some sort of psychic connection, and then like Sam Neill like calms him down, and then like they talk like very seriously, like, I knew this was a bad idea. I'm like as if like he has some kind of inkling about like some kind of psychic connection going on. Like, I couldn't follow it. I loved it.
Yeah, hell if I know, Seth. I can't help you there.
No.
My 2 cents on the doppelganger, because, well, plural, because there is one at the end as well.
Sam Neill.
Is that they both represent what the other person wanted their significant other to be. So like the teacher is a lot more like domestic, like doing the dishes, giving Bob a bath. She's more maternal than Anna. Like I feel my take, which is not coming from anything except me, like I haven't read about this, so I don't know, but my take was like, oh, this is like how relationships are, where you always have an ideal in your head of what would make the person easier to live with. And these doppelgangers kind of represent that like ideal state.
Absolutely.
Of like,
yeah, we should say that, or just that what this monster thing that Anna keeps feeding and becoming more human, it turns into another Sam Neill, basically.
Exactly. So it's like they're trying to create the best version of the other person that would be most pleasant to live with. And when you try to do that in real life, you could go crazy because it's not going to happen. You can't.
Yeah, and you drive the other person crazy.
The other person crazy because they're not what you're trying to mold them into. So in that regard, I was like, this is really quite true to life. Bizarrely, even though in the movie, it obviously isn't true to life at all. But that idea is very true. So it resonates with me, whether I'm wrong or not, I don't know.
Yeah, there's always something more valuable for me about something being emotionally true rather than like it going for realism on the screen and getting everything right. Like, like even a John Waters movie where everything goes fucking batshit and was cartoony from the get-go can sometimes have these moments of like emotional truth,
Exactly.
like where you feel something that's real. And that's what happens here, even in the midst of just outrageous psychedelic chaos.
Yep, I agree.
That's a good point.
I agree.
And then another twist on top of that is that in the end, Sam Neill ends up gunned down, and God, we'll get into that whole thing too. Because did we mention he's also like a spy who's being chased around by government agents? And I'm not making this up, listeners.
Yeah. So he was actually. I read that somewhere, and I thought they were just making fun of the movie because it did feel like a spy movie out of nowhere. He is a spy.
It's kept mysterious, but there's some kind of espionage mission he's returning from at the beginning that sounds like he might have assassinated somebody, and they're trying to get him back to do more assassinations, but he doesn't want to. He wants to spend time with his family, and then we forget any of that stuff happened until they show up again at the end, chasing him around, just so we get a shootout and exploding cars and like a motorcycle crash.
People will not believe you when you say it.
No,
it is fucking
crazy. Like the description of it is seriously more like when you're watching it, you're not like processing all of this at once, I guess. Like you're seeing it unfold, but there's something about the tone of it and the way that it's shot that makes all this more easily digestible than just like a verbal summary.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
William S. Burroughs soap opera with straight people in it. Weird.
Yeah, and that was just my roundabout way of getting to the part where both Samuel and his wife end up dead in a very dramatic, bloody way, and they're both, I guess his doppelganger goes home to the female doppelganger.
Yes.
Like they're going to then just take over, and the little kid is very freaked out when the male doppelganger shows up and just runs around the house yelling, "Don't open the door,
Poor
don't open
Bob.
it, don't open it, don't open it."
Yeah.
Jumps into a bathtub and floats on his face for a while. And the movie basically ends with like this close up on Anna's like face,
Or not Anna,
where she's like
but
about to. The other Anna 2.
Anna, yeah.
2.0, yeah, whatever, the teacher.
The teacher.
Yeah.
With the long hair.
And they both have green eyes. Yeah, and that's kind of what this movie operates on. Like it keeps throwing on all of these symbols and ambiguities just on top, one after the other, from the shots of the Berlin Wall, which you would imagine would carry some kind of thematic significance. You have the doppelgangers, you have the monster, you have all the spy stuff. There's a scene where she's like teaching ballet or something, and some girl is doing a stretch and like wailing into the camera in pain.
That was horrible. Oh.
Seth is so amazed that there's more to unpack.
It's like I think my brain was trying to bury some of this stuff. It was just like you can't. We'll get to this eventually in therapy, but the brain was trying to bury this.
The ballet.
Wow,
By the
I
way,
forgot about that. Oh,
I
wow.
still haven't even touched on the sex scene with the squid demon monster.
Thank you, Marc.
Oh yeah, that seemed extremely normal to me at that point. It's like. At last, we're getting this out of the way.
If you think that's normal, then you know you're in like a crazy film.
Yeah,
you're like, all right, yeah. This feels inevitable.
Feels real.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that the movie did that I really kind of ended up appreciating, given how messy the rest of the narrative is right during the credits. This movie is otherwise very like, it seems like it's going to be this like relationship drama, obviously, and the affair at first is presented like it's sort of the thing at the center of this, which obviously it ends up not being. But right in the opening credits, they have a guy's name that's like special effects for the creature.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, so there's going to be a creature.
Yes.
And every time the movie like escalated its like sort of ominous tone, I was like, oh boy, are we about to see the creature? And so when you finally do see the creature, the payoff in that scene to me was immense, and I think it's a pretty well done like makeup effect or whatever
It's
is
really
going on.
scary when it just slowly rises up in bed.
I love the creature stuff. I really think that my favorite, like the best way that I can appreciate this movie is when it leans into the really crazy horror stuff and the just bloodier and more disgusting that it gets, and the way this creature keeps growing and evolving and mutating. And again, ending up in that scene where Sam Neill is watching. And sorry, Sam, for using just your name instead of your character's name this whole time, but all I see is Sam Neill. Who's I don't know, there must be some sort of crazy like cuckold fantasy out there where a guy just wants to see like his wife having sex with this crazy like
it's a cool porno.
And she's like, almost, like she just like, that's all she says. She just looks at him straight in the eyes and it's like, almost. I was like, and then you haven't even talked about the music, Mark. That music, like the score blaring when he's watching this happen, is intense. Like, especially at that particular moment where it's like, what am I looking at? Like,
yeah, I love the score because it does remind me of like a Goblin score.
Exactly,
like
Suspiria.
But it almost like makes it feel like, oh, you're watching. It reminds me that I'm watching a horror movie, and a lot of the scenes where I'm like, what kind of movie is this? And then there's like this Goblin sounding synthesizer, and I'm like, oh, but what is? It's like it makes it even more confusing for me, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's funny is I'm pretty sure the 81-minute version doesn't cut out all of the gross stuff. It actually cuts out a lot of the wild relationship and ambiguous stuff.
That's what I figured.
It just distills it down to the like horror things, which I actually would be really interested just to see what that looks like. And maybe that's just because those are the only parts of the movie where I felt like, okay, I'm actually like appreciating the weirdness and the depravity here, as opposed to being kind of confused with a lot of the other stuff. And it's really weird to think about watching something that just cuts it down to like the genre elements.
Well, I would like to ask you guys your opinion on, as much as it's a confusing, like purposefully confusing movie, like the God stuff, like which seems to be at the center of a lot of the doppelganger, gross, like otherworldly spiritual aspect of the movie. They keep on talking about how she's like, God is inside of her. They know God. Like, I was perplexed.
Yeah, you have anything for that, Amy? Because I'm really more just on that opinion of like everyone in this movie just speaks in pseudo profound babble, and I couldn't expend the energy on trying to wade through all of it and dissect it. But maybe there's something there, though.
My guess, since it was based on the director's divorce, is that was something that he was, I'm guessing, I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing that maybe he was Catholic or religious in some way, and just kind of threw in a lot that he was personally struggling with in his own breakup. Like, something like that doesn't seem random to me. It seems like it's coming from a very deep place, and the person doesn't know how to articulate it in like a cohesive way. So they just kind of mention it because it's true to them, but not in a way that we could understand. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know how close my interpretation gets to his like initial purpose, but for me,
I don't think it matters.
It touches on him. Yeah, for me, it touches on the unknowable, like kind of chaotic aspect of a god creature that could be behind all of the confusing like phenomena that's going on in this movie, and that explodes everything. That like they are getting closer to God, but it's not necessarily this beautiful thing. It's complicated and unknowable. That's all that I could get. Again, more Lovecraftian God or something like that.
Yeah.
I could kind of picture Żuławski like being behind the camera and just feeding the actors lines and thoughts, you know, that maybe have been pulled from stray conversations he's had or whatever was bothering him that morning.
Exactly.
Maybe in a David Lynch kind of, you know, stream of consciousness kind of way. but in a way that definitely doesn't really invite the viewer in to get the full exposure and context for it, but more like you're recognizing that this is a guy who is in distress, who's making the movie, really.
Yeah, and I think I read when I first watched it that the actors were under hypnosis for a lot of this. So
What?
Yeah,
Whoa.
like he had them hypnotized. So there's like chunks of time that Sam Neill doesn't even remember happening because they were very. It's almost like
That might be for the best.
being on drugs, almost like where he would just put them into like a fugue state, almost. So there's a lot going on, and I feel like that just contributes to the uniqueness of this movie. I mean, this movie is so singular. Like, I can't compare it to anything else, which I really like.
That's interesting. We were just talking about Begotten, the movie Begotten, and they were talking about being hypnotized and being in various states of consciousness during that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Purposely.
I know there's like Herzog movies also that have done that.
Heart of Glass, apparently the whole cast was hypnotized.
Oof.
Weird, man. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but they were obviously on board. And this is the result.
They got something.
Yeah.
They really got something. Are they going? My question is though, are they going to get 4 stars from Marc Dottavio?
That is the question.
What, for Possession?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, unfortunately not. Oh. But
oh man, I thought you were. I thought I had you pegged.
Oh no. No, I think that I was definitely more prepared for it this time, and in the end, I'm not sure that I really connected with anything. It's more of a movie that I do stand back and just kind of see in awe of. Like, it's wild that this was put together, that people at Cannes watched this, that Isabelle Adjani is shrieking on the floor for minutes on end. I kind of admire and appreciate that kind of stuff without it actually really tapping into anything for me personally. And maybe that's just because this isn't the kind of like relationship that I recognize, or I don't know. I think the overload kind of got to me with this one. So I was a little more sympathetic to it this time. I didn't hate sitting through it or anything. But yeah, in the end, I think maybe the incoherence of it kind of kept me at more of a distance. But I think this was really great, especially that we had Amy on for this particular episode, because, I feel like you're in that group, that kind of cult that's built behind this, that are real, like, true believers in this movie, right? And you are not alone at all.
And I'm not, I don't like movies like this. It's actually very surprising to me that I resonate so much with it, because I normally would actively avoid something like this. So it's even more like props to the film itself, because this is not my cup of tea, typically. Like you, that was actually Marc, with horror.
Yeah, because I remember actually, I think I watched this on Letterboxd and logged it before you did. And when I saw your review pop up, I thought like, oh man, I thought she was going to like hate this movie.
Yeah, and a lot of people did. They were like, oh, you're going to hate this. And I was like, 5 stars, like spectacular. Like, and I even think that on a rewatch yesterday.
You learned something about yourself.
I did.
Through some movies.
Oh no.
Can you distill that down really to why this like resonates so much? For you, or what maybe what separates this from the other movies that you found like disturbing? Was it that this had more of an emotional truth to it than those movies?
I think it's what Seth and I were saying earlier, where I can relate to feeling very out of control after someone leaves you. And that like that feeling, I just think is so honest. And even though it's over the top, when you're going through a breakup, you feel crazy. Like, depending, on how like the longevity, how shocked you were that it happened, or if you were expecting it, yada, yada. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but I think it encapsulated an emotion very well that I haven't seen done that precisely, and like just balls to the wall. I also just admire how it like just doesn't give a shit like about anybody's interpretation. This is what that guy wanted to make, I feel like. And I always respect when someone, when I feel like the final product is what they wanted. So, I mean, there's no way this isn't. It's too crazy.
Yeah. And I would also, I would agree with all that. And I would also add that what makes it work for me is not only that it seems like a pure vision, but it's whether you like what you're getting or not, you're being given a lot. You're being like, it's maximalist. And I appreciate that. Even if you don't like all the stuff that you're getting, like, and of course you wouldn't like all the stuff that you're getting thrown at. It's generous, which I would say is maybe my problem with our next movie. It's not generous enough to warrant what the difficulty, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, jumping off that transition, then, we do like to ask at the end of each discussion for each particular movie if you would unwatch the movie, if you can. And usually the answer seems pretty clear by the point here. So I'm not even sure if it's worth asking, except I wouldn't unwatch it myself either.
No.
But I assume you guys are fans, right?
Fans.
I rewatched it. Not only would I not unwatch it, I rewatched it.
Yeah, I think I'll like it better next time.
Yeah.
And let me give a quick shout out to, I didn't really find a place to squeeze this in, but one of the parts that I am most entertained by this movie is that at some point Sam Neill hires the world's least conspicuous private detective ever. And there's like these scenes of Anna walking around completely deserted, empty streets, and this guy in a suit is running right behind her.
Good point. Fair point.
And that was another one of those moments where I was just like, no, they can't be introducing a private detective thread to this movie. They're not doing that. It's not possible.
And that detective is played by Carl During, who from Clockwork Orange, that we featured previously on the podcast.
Wow.
Oh, who was he in that movie?
He's the doctor.
We're trying to save you from yourself. That guy.
Yeah, he's like the guy administering the horrible behavior modification program.
I love him. Oh wow.
So our regular listeners will know that I am the silent producer, keeping the ship on course, and I do not weigh in on the question of whether I would watch or unwatch a movie, and that is not going to change today. But I do want to say that my dog hated this movie deeply, and it was the volume fluctuations were particularly chaotic, and it's probably the loudest movie I've ever played in my living room.
Wow.
And Baxter would unwatch this movie if you were here to weigh in.
Sorry, Baxter.
Sorry, Baxter. So would Bob.
Yeah, Bob would drown himself in his bathtub.
Bob and Baxter, same page.
Oh boy. So
Can I pause for one moment?
Yeah.
I think I'm hearing the dog yipping. I want to make sure he's okay.
Do we want to just take a short
dogs do
break
not
before
like this movie?
Dogs hate this movie.
They don't even like hearing us talk about it.
So our next film is by another Arthouse director, a very well-known one, is in the independent film community, which is Claire Denis. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with all the rest of her work, but she has a lot of notable movies. I think probably her most famous or well-known one is Beau Travage, which I'm just going to go with that as a pronunciation. That's what Wikipedia says.
Fuck the Europeans.
Yeah. But on top of that, there's like US Go Home, 35 Shots of Rum, White Material, High Life. People, I don't know, into independent film have probably encountered at least one of those at this point. But where are you guys coming from? Because I've actually only seen a few of her movies, although Beau Travage is one. And I know, Seth, you've seen that.
Yeah, I really like that one. I think that's a beautiful movie. And I also like Let the Sun Shine In, I think it's called.
Yep.
Uh yeah, that's a really interesting kind of non-linear take on romance, and I enjoy that one quite a
It's
bit.
like middle-aged, or I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen like 4 or 5 at this point and not liked any of them.
Oh,
So
you're a trooper.
that's, I'm
You
trying.
keep trying.
Yeah. It's like with Robert
I'm-
Altman, where I'm like hoping one day that I'll stumble upon one that actually does something. But to be fair, this one was the worst. So Marc, congratulations.
Oh yeah, this is definitely the best foot forward for Claire.
Yeah.
This is the initiation one.
This is the
So
worst.
Amy and I are actually agreed as far as not being fans of Beau Travage, even though pretty much everybody
Everyone is.
is on Seth's side, loves that movie.
Yeah.
And I love the ending, but everything before that is it doesn't really work for me.
Yeah.
But it does give a good sense of her general style, which it's very lyrical. It focuses a lot on texture and rhythm. Beau Travage in particular, there's a lot of like bodies and movement that kind of just for its own sake becomes hypnotic or mesmerizing. So I can appreciate that is something that I guess I do like about Beau Travage, is that there are sequences like that just on a visceral level I think kind of work, although the stuff with the characters doesn't for me. And
she's a first and foremost a very visual filmmaker, which is seems like an obvious thing to say about a filmmaker, but her in like she's about like observing things. It's rarely about dialogue. It's rarely about even like general scenes and sequences. It's quite often, like what you were saying. It's like, if anything, Beau Travage is about bodies and about watching these bodies do things.
It's sensual and visceral, and we get a little of that in Trouble Every Day, but it is kind of amusing that this was her follow-up to Beau Travage, which was this big breakthrough that everyone loved, except me and Amy, and she follows it up with this horror movie, which as far as I know is the only one she's ever made.
Thank God.
Which I think makes us a good companion with Possession, because these were people who are known in like the art house crowd, and then suddenly they come around the corner with this disgusting thing that's kind of playing off of other trends in horror movies at the time. So I know Trouble Every Day sometimes gets lumped in with that kind of new French extremity like strain of horror movies that were very graphic and brutal. And I guess that's mainly limited to 2 scenes in this movie, but I think that's
big scenes. Wow.
Yes. And I think that's the main juxtaposition here, is that we have eroticism intercut with carnage and the lines between the two. And I don't think this is as lyrically shot as any of the other movies that I've seen by her in general, but there is some kind of a visual dichotomy, I think, that must have been her intention.
Yeah, it also, like, the beginning of it especially, I was like, this looks like a student film. Like the quality of it is not even close to her other movies that I've seen. Like, it's very, I don't know, it looks like astonishingly low budget, more so than any of the others.
Yeah, I mean, the credits begin with Comic Sans. Which this movie is not that old. It would still be like a weird thing to see, especially at an art movie.
Yeah.
Something in Comic Sans opening up, especially something that is supposed to be disturbing in a horror movie. So in that, I think that's like my favorite part of the movie, honestly.
The credits.
Like gruesome film that starts with Comic Sans. Very radical.
Actually, the opening is my favorite part, because this has music by Tindersticks, and there's like a theme song that opens the movie that's called Trouble Every Day, which I really liked and had like stuck in my head afterwards. So I don't know. I think this at least gets off to a promising start in that because there's not a lot to grab onto at the beginning. There's some pretty shots of like shimmering water and stuff, and you have this song playing.
And like people making out in the back seat of a car, very involved. And then the Comic Sans comes, and you're like, where am I? What is real?
It's like this.
And right from the get-go, I can see evidence of what Marc is talking about, as far as even the stuff that I personally like about Claire is her camera work and her more flowing, like more poetic eye for movement and bodies and things like that. Right from the get-go, it's not a very interesting or like pretty looking. There's not a lot going on with that scene of them making out. They are just making out, and that continues throughout the movie of these, what in other movies of hers I would like look forward to, like these sort of lingering like observations of just phenomena taking shape or whatever, or gestures, just watching for gestures sake or something like that. But it seems like even there, she's not bringing her usual like A game. They're not like fitting in. They don't announce themselves with much importance, and that's what really makes this drag. And are debatably, like the rough stuff in this movie is obviously rough, but that almost it makes those scenes even more difficult, because it feels like there's no like I'm just being punished after being punished by being bored. Like now I have to watch someone's face get mutilated, like after being really bored.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess again I'll do my best to kind of try to summarize this, because there's not much to the movie, but it's largely a slow like reveal of how the characters are interconnected and exactly what everybody's motivations are. When it comes down to it, basically on one hand we have Vincent Gallo and his newlywed wife. I don't care what their names are. I'm just going to call him Vincent Gallo.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And
feels right.
Yeah. Yeah, on a honeymoon with his wife, but he is obviously distressed about something and very distant from her, and is trying to get information about this doctor he used to work with, because he was, I guess, fixated on his wife somehow. And at the same time, we discover that this other group of people that we've been seeing is the doctor and his wife, but the wife is this kind of feral sex maniac who, like, her husband keeps basically catching her having sex and then, I don't know, biting to death these guys. And he like keeps her locked in a room and is still in like a relationship with her, but he keeps having to like go bury bodies for her and stuff. And
the things we do for love.
Exactly. And
that's the theme of the podcast this time.
The things we do.
For some reason, Vincent Gallo is obsessed with getting back to this lady, although it's never made clear what kind of interaction they ever had in the past or what it was that drew him to her. And their paths do intersect at some point. But that's like the kind of surface level thing going on here, right? Did I miss anything big?
I think so.
Well, and also, Marc, your recollection of this movie is making it sound way more interesting than it is, which is the actual opposite of your explaining Possession. Like you're like, I'm like, oh, I want to see this movie that Marc is describing right now, and I'm like, no, I don't. It's terrible. So you're making
that is such a good point.
You're making it sound way more appetizing.
And it does. It's like the plot points.
Words.
Yeah,
they like announce themselves like that. Like, oh, he's a scientist, and like he's interested in the brain, and he's like, it sounds a lot more like a regular horror movie on paper. It has all these sort of like, but which, as again, like that's a good point that Possession does not. And I'm like reading about Possession and like, what is this stuff? What?
Yeah, but when you see Trouble Every Day, it's incredibly slow and kind of meaningless in a lot of senses. You don't connect with anyone. So it's very different hearing about the plot than actually seeing how she does it. Because it just...
Yeah, both are good examples of
Yeah.
like it's about the approach that the filmmaker is going. It's how they go about doing whatever it is they're going to do that really shapes the movie. It's
The how,
why
not the what.
directors get the clout they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I could see somebody clicking on this movie, you know, on Shudder, which is where it's currently streaming at the time of this recording, at least. And, you know, maybe they're throwing it on after they just finished like High Tension or Them or Wolf Creek or, you know, whatever, all those kind of string of gross movies that were coming out around the time. And really being like, whoa, what am I, is this, what is, this is not like, does not have the same approach as those movies. Maybe in the same way that if they had put Possession on Shudder, it would probably get the same reaction, just in the
opposite way.
Right.
Because this is actually very slow and dull, whereas Possession is like full throttle the whole time. They're really directly opposed in that sense.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll say this much. I don't think that I found it necessarily as like boring as you guys did, because I was at least intrigued for a while, because we get such a slow drip of information of what exactly is going on and where is this all heading. It was more like once it finally got to the end, and especially when it like cuts to black, that it suddenly was revealed like, oh, there's nothing going on here. Like it's just totally empty.
Yeah, I think you had some good faith there. I didn't with this one. I think that I felt like immediately, like I kind of knew that it was not headed anywhere for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was right.
Yep. And it's kind of depressing as you're realizing that you're right, because it keeps on going. And it's like, it's a short film runtime wise, but it feels very long. It's like an hour and 37.
For sure.
And it felt really, really long to me. But
Vincent Gallo's in it. Just before you turn off the podcast, let me say that Vincent Gallo is in it. That is like the one little glimmering aspect of this, that I get to look at his face.
Depends who you are, I guess.
Yeah.
I like his face. He's apparently like a kind of an awful dude, but I love him as an actor in like Arizona Dream and Buffalo 66. I think it's hard to look away, and he is very striking. But that's a double-edged sword for me too, that it's like, boy, he's given nothing in this movie, like hardly anything, but just like, if anything, like a gross physical scene at the end. But before that, like, seems like any possible dialogue that he could have added a flair to was cut from this movie. A lot of the scenes feel vaguely improvised, and again, like similar to Possession, but not in an inspired way. In more of like these actors don't really even understand what the movie is about, or like maybe they're still like figuring out what this scene is supposed to feel like anytime they are talking. Like there's even like uses of like double takes, like using different takes of the same line in this one scene that really took me out of it, where he's talking to one of the doctors, like he's trying to ask questions about the scientist whose wife he was like obsessed with, and she says like one line, and then it jumps to like the same line but just a different take, and it just reminded me that they are, I don't know, this feeling that they're still trying to like figure out what the hell they're doing or something. I don't know.
That scene especially that stood out to me as feeling really stilted and just almost bad. Like,
yeah.
And it does make me think that maybe the director also didn't know that this really does arrive kind of half-baked, and it was not thought through enough, and it presents a lot of like potentially interesting dynamics. We have this feral sex cannibal and her husband, and so there should be something interesting between them and what their relationship is.
Yes.
Or between Vincent Gallo and the sex cannibal, or between Vincent Gallo and her husband, who was the person he first knew, or between Vincent Gallo and his own wife. Yet all of these are just kind of left hanging there.
Yep. And they're not relatable, like, because everything is there's so little dialogue that you can't even, it feels very inaccessible to try to get a grip on what their actual struggle is, because they hardly talk. And the scene where he's like, Vincent's talking with the other, was it a scientist? Where she was being really weird with him. Yeah. And like, he's like, I wouldn't say I loved her, or it was just a bizarre. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, what am I supposed to get from this? I have no idea. I couldn't tell you at all.
Yeah. The fact that he's a scientist or something is also an aspect that kind of makes it so that you can't identify. It would be easier if he was more of a blank canvas, if he was more of an everyman, but like most of the characters, you either like don't get any information, or the information you get is like, he's doing something with brains. And I'm like, what?
It's such a lack of specificity. And it really that's what bothers me, is when it just feels so general that there's nothing. That's the only reason why it's dull for me, is because I can't hold on to any narrative that I could feel.
Yeah, and there's a suggestion that Vincent Gallo has like stolen this other doctor's work, and that there's some sort of wild ideas about the brain that were just too out there for this outfit, but we never get any details about what that is. It just disappears after they have that conversation. And when we do get dialogue, like in that one scene, it's very stilted. Or I remember like when we're introduced to Vincent Gallo's character, and he's flying with his wife in this plane, and he's just sitting there, and he goes, "I'm happy. Are you happy? I'm happy."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the like, nobody talks like that. But also it seems like it's just there as a placeholder. Like, hey, in this scene, we need to establish that he's saying he's happy. And that's like as far as any of the dynamics or exchanges go in this movie.
Yeah, it feels like there's not a lot in there making me want to stick it out with this movie. Like, I'll admit, this is maybe one of the most difficult movies we've ever done for me personally. I was scrubbing. I'll admit it. I was just hitting that forward arrow every once in a while just to like skip a couple seconds ahead. I didn't give a fuck. Like, and I don't know. I'll own up to that.
I'm telling Claire.
I just felt like I was in the end correct to do so. I don't know.
Justified.
Yeah, and we should probably talk about then, I guess, the two big scenes in this movie, because if there's any
talking about scrubbing, talking about skipping ahead. Oh my god, I had to. I can handle some gross shit. There was something about this particular gross shit that was too much.
Yeah, and I think that in this movie, that's the only reason it's in this podcast, is because it is isolated to these two scenes. And one is basically where these two guys break into the doctor's house, and the sex maniac is, boarded up in there, and they come across her, and she, starts seducing and having sex with one of them. And that's the, first time I guess we get to see her whole modus operandi, where she is, starts having sex with them, but then she starts to like chew on their face. And it's not even totally clear to me everything that's happening. I want to say that she like chews his tongue off or something.
Yeah, taking his skin and like feeling pieces of his skin. And I had to get out of there.
Yeah, and it's like, and there's like it's the sounds of it that are so. That's what makes it is like hear the.
That's a great point.
The flapping of skin sound. It was really the sound that got under my skin.
And the screaming, yeah,
and the screaming,
screaming,
the screaming at the end really got. That's what I was like. Okay, It's not even the
Oh, yeah.
visuals; it's the screaming. It seemed very real.
Yeah, well, Seth wimped out on that last scene. Wimped out. Part
Yeah,
2
I
of the
think
gross
that's-
stuff in this movie,
Yeah,
it just
that's
had
even
everything
worse.
in it. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, that's much
'Cause,
worse.
yeah.
Yeah.
The next, it ends on Gallo sort of giving in. Yeah, how does it work? So Gallo goes, once again, he's Vincent Gallo. Sam Neill is Sam Neill. Vincent Gallo goes and he meets the wife finally that he's been obsessed with.
Like
and he
right
talks,
after she killed this guy too, so she's
oh
covered in
yeah,
blood.
she's
body
covered
is
in
there.
blood, and he's like real turned on by this, which I kind of, you kind of see coming in a sort of boring, drawn out way, in my opinion, that like he is also one of these like zombie people that loves to eat flesh, and that's like sexually exciting to this person. Because there's also like foreshadowing his girlfriend has like a bite mark on her arm that is clearly from him. But yeah, they meet, she's bloody, he loves it, they love each other. I don't know why they don't eat each other. That's a little confusing, but maybe
That's really what I was waiting for.
insert scientific weird sci-fi lore. But then they proceed. He leaves her, doesn't eat her. She doesn't eat him. And then he goes and finds a maid who was, I guess, introduced earlier, like vaguely, in that like she walked into Vincent Gallo's hotel room at one point and didn't know he was there. And he said like, "Oh yeah, I'm in here." And then she's
That
like,
was a
"I'm
good
sorry."
That was a
Vincent
good
Gallo, by
impression.
the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best here. I'm doing my best. All right.
I'm happy.
I
Are you
can't
happy?
get my
I'm
eyes to
happy.
do what his. I'm happy. I can't use a
And by the
shifter
way,
car.
he doesn't just leave her there; he kills her, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The
You'd want to die
the
though.
I mean
Boy.
the wife that he finally meets up with.
Oh, I
he
thought you meant-
strangles her.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Oh man,
that
see,
was
brain's
anybody
already
else-
trying to leave this one for therapy.
Was anybody else baffled by that? Because I felt like the whole movie was building to these two getting together, and within like 30 seconds of them meeting, it seems like he strangles her to death, and she gets caught on fire, and then he just leaves, and it's like the whole thing was for nothing. And now we're like, oh, so that whole thread of the story is over.
Oh man, I
guess.
tried to block that out. That's right. He does like just strangle her, and again, even more mysteriously, does not take a bite out of her.
Yeah, and isn't there like a fire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a
Which
that was another thing that happened with this movie is like it ended and I couldn't remember most of it.
yeah,
Immediately after I was sitting there and I was like, can I even remember one scene besides the last one? And it was actually difficult to recall. Bizarre. Like
right.
that's never happened to me before. Like my brain was like, nope, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You don't have to remember.
Unprecedented, unwatchable.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I
they-
think it makes the final act feel so aimless after that, because it just so unceremoniously disposes of this other character, and then what are we left with?
Right.
With Gallo
Yeah.
finally cornering this maid that he's been watching the whole movie. Okay, maybe something interesting will happen there. But then what happens, Seth?
It starts out consensual, I guess, as much as you can tell, maybe, and because he like walks in on her getting changed, and she sort of is like, kind of seems like she's into it for a second, and then he gets very grabby and forceful, and she clearly doesn't want it and is trying to escape, and that's when the biting starts, and it turns into a
It's bad.
rape / eat the person scene, which the second I caught a whiff of that, I kind of hightailed it with my skip button. I cheated real bad with this one.
So I was watching this movie alone the whole time, and my partner came downstairs and went like to the fridge, and I swear it's only like 20 seconds on screen. I mean, you guys know the shot that I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
What during this? It's another, oral sex gone bad kind of thing, calling back to Antichrist, I guess. And that was the only moment that he walked by and looked at the screen and went, "Oh!"
That is the
I was
only
like,
appropriate response.
You could have walked by any other time the whole movie.
That reminds me of watching like Criterion movies when I was like in high school, like watching them downstairs, and then like I'm watching art movies, Mom, and then like it'd be the one time in like the Fellini movie where there's tits or something. I'm like, oh, excellent.
Everyone walks in at the wrong time. That's just the way that it is. But
is there a right time for this movie?
No, but that is the wrong time. If there is a wrong time,
there's no wronger time.
There's no wronger time.
There's no wronger time.
Yeah, and then it ends, and you're like, "Thank you." Bye.
Yeah, he just goes back to his wife, takes a shower, and he's like, "I want to go home."
Yeah,
and then cut to black.
Yep.
And so even this shocking, scene that happens, it seems like the whole movie's been building to this point too. Like, oh, what's finally going to happen? And it's nothing surprising at all. It's exactly what you would expect. Oh, it's him acting out the fantasy that you see in the very first scene that he's introduced in. He has like a little flash to someone covered in blood that, makes it obvious that that's kind of what he's into. And that's it.
And there's a vague moment at the end where they he's like, we see him washing the blood off in the shower, and like, better get the blood off before my girlfriend gets in and sees it. And he like gets it all off, and he hugs the girlfriend, and that's the final scene. And there is like the final shot is her looking up with like these kind of stunned eyes, which sort of has this "the end?" kind of thing from a stupid like horror movie. But even and for a second, maybe like you can try and piece together, like, is this some sort of movie that's trying to say something about like taking that bad guy back, taking that partner back that you shouldn't be with or something? And it just starts, anytime I try and find things like that are in something like Possession, which are like, okay, yeah, crazy shit is happening, but within the crazy shit is like ongoing monologue about relationships and dysfunction and things like that. And anytime I try and do that with this movie, it kind of falls apart because, again, I think it's super half-baked. I think Claire would have done a lot better to just have it be a Claire movie where she's focusing on the visuals and the artsy sort of aspects of this movie, which actually make up most of the movie. Or she would have been better suited to just focus on the gross stuff, I think. Like, just go full throttle horror movie.
Pick a lane.
Pick a side.
The amalgamation of them actually winds up being not very interesting, which on paper, like a methodical, artsy horror movie approach to something that I would assume would be paint by numbers psycho movie is really attractive to me. But here it totally misses anything I would want.
Yep. I'm with you, Seth. And I also think, I feel like I read somewhere afterwards that part of the reason that the last scene was there was to juxtapose the woman scene where like she seduces the guy and he's completely willing and into it and then harms him. Whereas this one has a lot more of a rape connotation to it. And it's like the difference between the sexes almost. It's like, but I mean, I didn't gather anything from it that I didn't read about afterwards. I was like, oh yeah, this movie did not do a great job of translating its underlying message, like absent of reading about it afterwards.
Yeah, and even as a horror movie that's made by somebody who's so visually skilled, it just seems strangely lacking, like in atmosphere or tension.
True.
It really doesn't jump out at you in any kind of way like that. Shout out to Tindersticks, though. I still like their music.
Yeah, I'd never listened to them.
They're good.
I guess I will not spitefully ignore them, but guilt by association, that's not fair.
Yeah.
I don't know if they wrote that song like for this movie or what, but maybe she just heard the song and was like, what the heck? It's not like the title makes any sense anyways with the rest of the movie, except in the most general way. Like, well, I guess there's lots of trouble going on.
Super general, just like, yeah. I also didn't like that aspect of it. It's like, what are we supposed to learn? What are we supposed to get from this? I don't know. I really, truly don't know. And I don't even remember it well enough to guess. It's like I was brainwashed as soon as it ended. Like wiped clean, Men in Black style, where I'm like, I don't know, just don't see it. That's all I have to say. Don't watch it.
So in a way, you already unwatched this.
Mentally. It's my body saving me from myself.
I was trying.
Tony, it's dark where you are. It's suddenly dark.
On the video now, everyone's going to be able to tell what time of day we started recording.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, my light's like really, really bright now because I had the light from the window. And I was like, this looks terrible, but I can't get up.
Seth finally has the skin tone of a human being.
I know.
Yeah, I'm no longer staring at the birth of Christ anymore.
Yeah, but now I am. Like, now I'm really white.
Yeah,
the rest
now
of
God
us
is looking in your window.
As time goes on, and Seth is,
Marc, on the other hand, looks the same. The lighting.
Would you guys?
Yeah.
Marc's in a windowless room.
Yeah.
I'm broadcasting this from prison. I don't know if you guys knew that about me.
For the criminally insane.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Tony?
So if you guys had to pick, would you rather date one of the sex demons from Possession or one of the sex demons from Trouble Every Day?
Ooh, wow.
The Possession one, at least.
And which one?
The one from Possession, at least, appears to give pleasure. The other one is there's no pleasure. You're just in pain.
Yes.
I think, frankly, I have dated the sex demon from Possession.
That's amazing. Brush with celebrity.
Wow.
A few different ones, actually.
Wow,
yeah.
Marc.
Sorry. But yeah, no, definitely. He seemed at least like concerned with her pleasure.
Right.
Indeed.
Almost.
Like in a Hellraiser kind of way, where this seemed more. I'm not getting past the like going through pain to get to pleasure. I think it's just pain. So no, thank you, Vince. As much as your eyes pierce into my little heart.
Yeah, I'd say a hard pass on Vincent Gallo.
All right. Are we unanimous on wanting to unwatch this movie?
Yes.
Let's say.
Yes.
Let's say it. One, two, three. Unwatch.
I didn't know what you were going to say there.
I'm with you.
Yeah, we'll try it again next time.
You got to prepare him for that, Seth.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's kind of funny, though, because I think that if we were going to put this onto some kind of a scale, that I was most forgiving to this movie as far as, like, I didn't start to, like, dislike it for longer than you guys did, apparently. So do with that what you will.
Yeah, this was.
It was a record for me. I
this
think.
was
me
so
too.
Instantaneous. Me too, Seth. I was like, this is painful, and I'm only doing this because I'm on the podcast. I 100% would have turned it off. if that just like expresses my level of commitment here, because I was like, we
appreciate it.
This is a slog. Like, sorry.
You wouldn't have even gotten to the most upsetting part.
No, and actually, I thought of Audition. You know how, like, you guys have seen Audition, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. You know how Audition, the famous torture scene, is there's only, like, 20 minutes left in the movie. So I was like, oh, I only have a few minutes left of Trouble Every Day. Something is bound to happen, even though I had 7 minutes left. So that was like a record also of putting something really, really disturbing at the very end, like very, very end. So
Yes, but audition gifts you with a wonderful, engaging movie beforehand, and then you are willing to go in there to the dark place more willingly.
Yeah. Well, an audition is disturbing before that moment. Actually, I think, yeah, I would say more effectively almost with the guy in the bag.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
But again, even before that, I've been given something, and I'm willing to go there now.
Yeah. So, Marc,
Trouble Every Day has us longing for the gentle touch of auditions.
Those were the days.
So, Marc, you would unwatch this as well, ultimately, or no?
I think so, just because it ends up being so fundamentally like hollow and meaningless. So it did kind of feel like a waste more than Possession did. Mm-hmm. So
unanimous, unwatchable.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and, go ahead, whether you like Possession or not, you can go ahead and marvel at it and gawk at it. And Trouble Every Day, it's hard to imagine having a reaction that's strong in any direction besides
pass.
Yeah, I read something like one of the best Letterboxd reviews I read of Trouble Every Day was something like, we've all been in like a situation where we're being led around by someone we don't really know, and then we're slowly like figuring out that we don't really want to be following this person, and we're probably not going anywhere good. And I think that was a pretty good summary of this thing.
We can break up with this movie.
Yes.
Goodbye. Swipe left.
You are the weakest link.
All right. I think we probably have an ending in there somewhere, don't you think, Tony?
Yeah, you just have to thank our guest for coming and
Thanks.
The uncultured swine.
But speaking of new relationships, we are very, very happy to have welcomed Amy on to the podcast, and hopefully sometime in the future, maybe we can have you back, because it was really a blast, and hopefully we can find something that's not too terrible, that you could watch, but also not too boring.
Trouble Every Other Day.
Right.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, guys. I am glad that I'm still in one piece. And from now on, if I see Vincent Gallo in anything, I will abruptly shut it down.
Oh, man. Arizona Dream, though. I don't know. Whatever.
That's too bad, yeah. And also, check out Amy on Letterboxd. Amy Hensarling. Got your full name on there. It's no secret.
Yeah, I think my username is like Amy Catherine K, actually, even though that's an inside joke from a long time ago, but I just never changed it. So, Amy Catherine K.
Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti. Hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchablespod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.